The high Arizona air, sometime between the 1850s and the 1890s, tasted of pine resin and pulverized rock. Dusty Bend itself was little more than a single scar of a street, gouged between the last gasp of the desert and the first breath of the high pine hills. It was a town holding its breath, waiting to see if the railroad, which was already tearing up the horizon, and the rumors of silver in the canyons would make it rich or just make it bleed. For Claire Bennett, who was 24 years old, it was simply home, or the closest thing she had known since leaving Missouri. Her shop was her fortress. The sign, painted in careful black letters, read C. Bennett, Photography and General Mercantile. Inside, it smelled of coffee beans, bolts of calico, and the sharp, metallic tang of the collodion she used for her plates. Claire was a practical woman. She had to be. She ran this business with her younger brother, Eli, and the mortgage left by their father was a heavy, paper-thin shadow over every transaction. She was tall, with a way of standing that seemed to brace her against a wind no one else could feel. Her freedom was not an abstract concept. It was measured in the sacks of flour she sold, the accounts she balanced, and the heavy wooden tripod she hauled into the wilderness. Her camera was a beast of mahogany and brass. It did not steal souls. It did not lie. It captured light, and light, Claire believed, was the only truth you could trust in a territory where a man's word was as shifting as the alkali flats. She did not waste her expensive, fragile glass plates on portraits of stiff townsfolk in their Sunday best. She captured the crack in the adobe wall, the skeleton of a long-dead ocotillo, the way the light fell on the mesas at dusk. She was documenting a world she knew was already vanishing, pressed flat by the iron will of men like Silas McGraw. Kainez moved without sound, a shadow woven from the red rock and the juniper. His world was not defined by painted signs or paper debts, but by the ancient paths carved by his ancestors and the sacred pulse of Tubil-Ni, the spring that gave life. He was a warrior of the Dain, the people, but his battles now were fought with silence and observation. He was a scout, his eyes trained to see the lie in the landscape, the broken branch that signaled a white man's passage, the unnatural line of the telegraph wire, the distant plume of the railroad's smoke. He carried the discipline of his people as a second skin, but beneath it, a quiet fire of responsibility burned. His community was thirsty. The settlers' sheep were grazing the land bare, and now the railroad was coming, a snake of iron that threatened to swallow the world. His duty was simple and vast: protect the water, protect the land, and find the sacred objects stolen from his grandfather's hogan. He had seen the way the white men looked at the land as something to be broken and owned. He looked at it and saw the faces of his grandmothers. Silas McGraw looked at the land and saw only numbers. He was a man built of Eastern money and Western ambition, a creature of cravats and contracts. He had come to Arizona territory to build a railroad, but the railroad was just the tool. Land was the prize, and the silver rumored beneath it was the true god. He saw civilization not as a community, but as a transaction. He intended to bring progress to Dusty Bend, even if it meant starving the town of the very water that kept it alive. His right hand was the man who wore the town's star. Sheriff Amos Pike was a man whose appetites had outgrown his meager salary. He had the easy charm of a predator who no longer needed to hide. He and McGraw were two parts of the same machine. McGraw provided the vision and the capital. Pike provided the color of law, ensuring that all the land grabs, the diverted water rights, and the intimidation tactics were filed, stamped, and made official. The townsfolk of Dusty Bend were caught in the middle. They were miners, prospectors, merchants, and saloon keepers, people who had come west to escape something or to find something. They were torn. McGraw's railroad promised jobs. His mine promised a boom. But they also saw the hard-eyed men he employed, and they knew, with a settler's uneasy instinct, that the line between civilized and savage was often just a matter of who held the better rifle. Claire's best friend, Rosa Delgado, understood this better than anyone. Rosa was a vaquera, born in the saddle, with a lineage that stretched back to Mexico long before the Americans had drawn their lines on the map. She was whip-thin. With a dry wit and a Colt revolver she could use better than most men. She often stopped by Claire's shop, not for supplies, but for the quiet company of the only other woman in town who seemed to understand what it meant to stand on her own. "He is a snake, Claire," Rosa said one afternoon, leaning against a barrel of nails. She did not have to say who he was. "And our good Sheriff Pike is the hole he lives in." Claire finished wiping down a glass plate, her hands stained brown with a silver nitrate. "McGraw is just a businessman. Rosa, he has the law on his side." Rosa snorted, a sound like a horse sensing trouble. "He buys the law. There is a difference. Be careful with that camera of yours. Some men do not like the truth." "It is just light," Claire said, but she felt a chill. Her brother, Eli, burst in then, all elbows and youthful energy. He worked as the postal rider, his roots connecting Dusty Bend to the wider, encroaching world. He was 19, and he still believed in the inherent goodness of a government-stamped letter. "Package for you, Claire," he announced, dropping a heavy crate. "More chemicals from St. Louis." He lowered his voice. "And I heard something. McGraw's men are setting survey lines up by the Tubilani Spring." Claire froze. The spring. It was outside of town, on land that was supposedly protected, land the Navajo used. "What survey lines?" Eli shrugged, his optimism deflating. "For the railroad, they say, but it is nowhere near the main track." Later that day, Claire saw Kynez for the first time, though she did not know his name. He was in town, standing perfectly still outside the assayer's office. He was not looking at the maps or the ore samples in the window. He was looking past them, through them, as if watching a different world entirely. He wore buckskins and a simple cotton shirt, his black hair tied back. He was lean, economical in his stillness, and he made the rest of the bustling street look clumsy and loud. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. His were dark, unreadable, and held a quiet, ancient patience. Then he was gone, melting back into the alleyway. That evening, Kai stood before Hastin Yazi, an elder whose face was a map of the very land they were trying to protect. The elder sat by a small fire, his eyes closed as Kai spoke in the soft, flowing cadence of their language. "He brings the iron road," Kai said, "and his men mark the land near Tubilani. They are looking for the water." Hastin Yazi opened his eyes. They were old, but the firelight found a fierce intelligence in them. "He is not just looking for the water, my son, he is looking for the silver. The water is only the tool to get it, and the sacred masks they stole, they think it is just decoration. They do not understand it is our memory. You must watch him. You must be the rock he does not see." Kai's purpose was absolute. It was not a choice. It was a fact, like the rising of the sun. He had to protect the spring. He had to recover the stolen items. Claire's purpose felt smaller, sharper. She had a debt to pay. She had a brother to protect. She had a deep, abiding need to be beholden to no man, not a husband, not a banker, and certainly not a railroad tycoon. She had not come west to find love. She had seen what love did to her mother, tying her to a life that ended in cholera and a shallow grave. Claire had come west to be free, and she would capture that freedom, one 60-second exposure at a time. The sun was setting, bleeding a violent, beautiful orange across the sky. Claire loaded her heavy camera and her box of plates onto her mule. She was heading for the canyons near Tubilani. The light there, she had heard, was extraordinary in the morning. She was going to capture the truth. From a high ridge, Kynez watched her small caravan, the mule and the woman, move toward the sacred lands. He saw the strange, three-legged device on the mule's back. He saw her as just another white settler, trespassing, taking. He did not know her name. He only knew she was moving toward the water, and the water was his to protect. The two worlds, one of glass plates and paper debts, the other of ancient springs and sacred duty, were about to collide. The dust of Dusty Bend had yet to settle. The canyon air was so clear it felt sharp in her lungs. Claire Bennett had her head under the black focusing cloth, the world reduced to an upside-down, shimmering image on her ground glass. She was trying to capture the precise moment the morning sun struck a fissure in the towering red rock, turning the sandstone to gold. The silence was perfect, broken only by the stamp of her mule's hoof and the faint, chemical smell of her own collodion solution. A sound, not of this place, cracked the morning open, a single rifle shot, echoing flat and ugly. Before Claire could pull her head out, a second shot, then a volley. The ground began to thrum. It was not thunder, it was horses, and they were coming fast. She ripped the cloth away, blinking in the sudden glare. A heavy stagecoach, painted a deep, corporate green, careened around the canyon bend, its 6-horse team running in blind panic. 2 men were on the driver's box, one hunched over the reins, the other firing a rifle back at a knot of riders half hidden in the dust. Her mule brayed, a high, terrified sound, and bolted, ripping its reins from her hand. "No!" Claire shouted, lunging for the animal. It was useless. The mule, carrying her canteens and spare plates, disappeared down a sidewash. More bullets. A chip of rock exploded from the canyon wall just above her head, stinging her face with hot dust. She was exposed. The stagecoach was now between her and the attackers. A terrible, moving shield. She dropped, scrambling on her hands and knees toward her camera, her first, only instinct to save the heavy brass lens. The world dissolved into chaos. The stagecoach driver pitched forward, a limp sack. The guard fell back, his rifle clattering onto the rocks. The coach, driverless, hit a washout. The lead horses screamed as the vehicle tilted, balanced for one impossible second on 2 wheels, and then collapsed onto its side with a sound of screaming wood and metal. Claire pressed herself into the scant cover of a boulder, her heart trying to escape her chest. The riders, 5 of them were whooping, fanning out, still firing into the wreckage. A hand clamped down on her shoulder. She did not even have time to scream. A force, hard as the rock itself, yanked her off her feet. She was dragged backward, her boots scraping, into a narrow fissure in the cliff face she had not even seen. Her back hit the stone, knocking the breath from her. A man was pressed against her, his body shielding her from the opening, his hand still clamped on her arm. It was the Navajo man from town, Kai Nez. He was radiating a dangerous heat. She could smell the pine on his buckskin shirt, the sweat from his exertion, and the clean, sharp scent of the desert. He was looking out, his profile rigid, watching the ambush. Claire shoved at his chest. "Let go of me!" Her voice was a ragged whisper. His eyes, dark and intense, snapped to hers. He did not move, but his grip on her arm tightened. "Be still," he commanded. His voice was low, a rumble. "You want to die?" She froze. His gaze was not hostile. It was something more fundamental, like a hawk's. It was absolute. She became aware of her own frantic breathing and the hard planes of his body against hers. He had a long knife at his hip. She stopped struggling. They watched together from the shadows. The attackers were dismounting. They were not Navajo. Claire's blood ran cold. They were white men, hard-faced and bearded, wearing dusty range clothes and military-issue pistol belts. One of them, a man with a scarred face, put a final, careful bullet into the driver, who had stirred. They were not robbing the coach. They were executing it. They began smashing crates, pulling items out and tossing them onto the ground. The leader barked an order. "That is enough. Make it look right. Pike will be here in 20 minutes. They remounted, fired a few more shots into the air, and rode hard, not back toward town, but deeper into the Navajo lands. Silence, heavy and sickening, fell back onto the canyon. They are gone, Claire breathed, her knees shaking. Kai Nez released her. The sudden absence of his touch left her cold. He moved from the crevice with a liquid grace, his rifle now in his hands. He had not had it a moment before. Where had it come from? He knelt by the wreckage, his body tense. Claire, her photographer's curiosity overriding her fear, stumbled out after him. The scene was grotesque. The horses were a tangled, screaming mess. The cargo was scattered everywhere. And then she saw it. One crate, splintered open, had spilled its contents. It was not flour or tools. On the red dust lay a wooden mask, inlaid with chips of brilliant blue turquoise and polished jet. Beside it were intricately beaded rings and a ceremonial staff. It was beautiful, and it felt profoundly private. "Do not touch that!" Kai's voice was sharp. He was standing over another broken box. This one contained ledgers, thick, leather-bound books. One was open, the wind flipping its pages. Claire could read the headings: McGraw Land Acquisitions, Water Rights Surveys, Parcel G14. These were deeds, land registries. A sound made them both look up. A plume of dust, coming fast from the direction of Dusty Bend. "The sheriff," Claire said. Kai's body changed. He became a coiled spring. He looked from the sacred items to the oncoming riders, then to Claire. His eyes held a clear warning. He grabbed the nearest mask, a smaller, simpler one, and a single beaded ring, securing them in his belt. "Kai," she started. They said Pike was coming." He just looked at her. "You saw nothing." "But you saw," he repeated, his voice low and dangerous. "What he will tell you that you saw." Before she could answer, he was gone. He did not run. He simply stepped behind a fin of rock and vanished. Sheriff Amos Pike rode in as if he owned the sunlight, his silver star winking. He had 4 deputies with him, and they did not look surprised. They looked grim and purposeful. Pike dismounted, his gaze sweeping the scene. He saw Claire, and his eyes narrowed. "Miss Bennett, what in tarnation are you doing out here?" I was taking photographs. The light." Her voice sounded thin. Pike ignored her. He walked over to the spilled cargo, his boot nudging the sacred items. "Well, damn it all." He spat a stream of tobacco juice. "It is just as I feared. A Navajo raid. Savage." "Sheriff," Claire said, her voice shaking but finding a thread of steel. "Those men, the ones who did this, they were not Navajo. They were white men. I saw them." Pike turned to her slowly. His face was all easy charm, but his eyes were as cold as a snake's. "Ma'am, you have had a shock. The sun out here plays tricks on a body. These are Navajo artifacts, are they not?" He gestured to the mask. "It is an open and shut case. They attacked the coach carrying Mr. McGraw's vital supplies. They killed 2 good men. But I heard one of them say—" "You heard nothing, Miss Bennett," Pike interrupted, his voice hardening. "You are a woman. Rattled. I will hear no more of it. We will be rounding up a posse and heading to the reservation. This kind of lawlessness will not stand." He turned his back on her, a clear dismissal. A cold dread settled in Claire's stomach. This was a lie, a monstrous, planned lie. One of the deputies was riding a crate. "Sheriff, this one is from the McGraw line. Seems they were after the payroll." "Probably," Pike said, distracted. Claire looked at the crate the deputy was manhandling, and then she looked at her camera. It was ruined. The heavy mahogany body was cracked. The tripod snapped in half, but the brass lens, miraculously, was intact, and the plate holder with the glass negative she had prepared, it was still locked in place. She had set up her shot just as the coach rounded the bend. The lens had been pointed directly at the scene. She had been under the cloth, her hand on the cap, ready to expose. Had she, in the panic? She could not remember. She went to the camera, her hands trembling. She unlocked the plate holder and slid it free. It was heavy. It was intact. She looked back at the wreckage. Her eyes traced the path of the overturned coach, and she saw it. A single plank of wood, separate from the rest, half buried in the dust. It must have been ripped off when the coach first hit the washout. Branded into that plank, unmistakable, was the stylized M of the Silas McGraw Railroad Company. Pike was lying. The men who attacked the coach worked for McGraw. They had attacked their own shipment. She looked at the spilled ledgers, the sacred masks, and the dead men. This was not a robbery, it was a fabrication. "Harlan," Pike was shouting, "bag up that Indian trash as evidence." Claire clutched the heavy glass plate holder to her chest. It felt like it was burning. If she had captured an image, if that plate held what she had seen, it was the truth. It was proof. She looked at Pike, who was already mounting his horse, his face set in a mask of righteous anger. She thought of her shop, of Eli, of the mortgage. To accuse this man, to accuse Silas McGraw, was suicide. She was a woman alone, with no one but a brother who was too young and a friend who was too hot-headed. Pike tipped his hat to her, a gesture of pure mockery. "You best get on back to town. Miss Bennett, this is man's work now." As he rode off, Claire stood alone in the canyon, the smell of gunpowder and blood mixing with the scent of her chemicals. She was trapped. To stay silent was to be complicit in a lie that would surely lead to more death. To speak out was to aim a loaded gun at her own head. Miles away, Kainez laid the small, wooden mask before Hastynyazi. The elder touched it, his fingers tracing the carved lines. "They have done it," Hastynyazi said, his voice a low sigh. "They have started the fire." They were white men. Kai stated, "They staged the attack. They left these things to be found. They want an excuse to move against us, to take the water." "This McGraw," the elder said. "He does not understand what he is stealing. He thinks it is just wood and beads. He does not know he is stealing our balance." Kai looked at the mask, his jaw tight. "I will restore it." Back at the canyon, Claire found her mule, its leg caught in a tangle of mesquite. As she calmed the animal, she carefully packed the precious, unruined glass plate. It was, she realized, the only thing that had survived the morning. The question was, had she the sun beat down, and the town of Dusty Bend, simmering with the rumor of a savage attack, waited? The tinder had been lit. Claire Bennett rode back into Dusty Bend feeling like a ghost. The mule, limping slightly, was her only companion. She had left her shattered camera in the canyon, hidden under a pile of rocks, taking only the precious, unexposed plate holder. The town, when she reached it, was not the sleepy collection of adobe and pine she had left. It was a hornet's nest that had been kicked. Men were gathered in angry knots outside the saloon, their voices loud. Sheriff Pike was on the saloon steps, his chest puffed out, holding a piece of the turquoise inlaid mask he had collected as evidence. "They will not threaten our supply lines," Pike declared, his voice carrying, "They will not murder our citizens in cold blood. Mr. McGraw has authorized a bonus for every man who joins the posse. This savagery ends now." A ragged cheer went up. Claire slipped past, her face pale, guiding her mule toward the alley behind her shop. She felt dizzy. The lie was already a fact. It had been repeated, and now it was true. She got the mule settled, her hands shaking as she unstrapped the plate holder. She carried it into her shop like a bomb. Eli was out, thank God, likely delivering mail on the far side of town. She went into her small, windowless dark room at the back, the room that smelled of chemicals and dreams. She placed the glass plate, still safe in its holder, on a high shelf. She stood in the dark, the red safe light painting her face, and just breathed. The front bell jangled. Claire jumped, her heart seizing. She stepped out, smoothing her dusty skirt. It was Rosa Delgado. Her friend's dark eyes took in Claire's state at a glance, the dust, the ripped sleeve, the tremor in her hands. "Madre de Dios," Rosa whispered, locking the shop door behind her. "You are alive. The talk in town. They said the Navajo hit the stage. I knew you were out that way." "They were not Navajo, Rosa," Claire said, her voice flat. "They were white men. They worked for McGraw. I heard them. They were waiting for Pike." Rosa's face hardened, losing all its usual humor. She looked like a judge. And Pike, he told me I was a rattled woman. He told me I saw tricks of the sun. He is leading a posse to the reservation." Rosa let out a long, slow breath, a hiss of pure anger. "That son of a pig! He will start a war, just so McGraw can have his railroad." She looked around the shop. "Where is the camera?" "Broken. I left it." Claire motioned with her head toward the back. "I have the plate, the one I was setting up. I do not know if I took the picture. I do not know if the cap was on." Rosa followed her into the dark room. She looked at the plate holder on the shelf. "Then you must find out. You must develop it." "And then what?" Claire's voice cracked. "Show it to whom, Sheriff Pike? He is part of it. Show it to the townsfolk. They are sharpening their knives, ready to follow him. If I show that picture, Rosa, they will call me a liar, a traitor, or worse, an Indian lover. I will lose this shop. Eli and I will be run out of town. Or worse, they killed those men. Rosa, they will not hesitate to kill me." "So you will do nothing." Rosa's voice was dangerously quiet. "You will let him march on Hastings' people. You will let him hang this lie on them." "I am scared," Claire finally yelled, the sound shockingly loud in the small room. "Yes, I am scared. I have Eli to think about. I have this mortgage. This is all we have. My truth will not mean anything when we are starving." Rosa looked at her for a long moment. "I have seen you haul that heavy box of yours 10 miles into the desert to take a picture of a dead tree. Claire, I thought you were capturing the truth. But you only want to capture the safe truth. This is different. This truth has teeth." She turned and left the dark room. "I will be at the stables. You decide if you are a photographer or just a woman who owns a camera." The sting of Rosa's words lingered long after she was gone. By afternoon, a new rumor was snaking through the dust. It was quieter than the talk of the raid, but far more poisonous. Claire heard it from Mr. Miller, the assayer, when he came in for tobacco. "Big news. Miss Bennett," he said, not meeting her eye. "Mr. McGraw is petitioning the Territorial Council for exclusive rights to the Tabilani Spring, going to build a proper reservoir. He says, pipe it right into town. For progress." Claire felt the floor drop out from under her. Tabilani, the spring near the canyon. The spring Inez had been watching. "But that land is not his," Claire said, her voice faint. Mr. Miller shrugged, his eyes on his tobacco pouch. "It is territorial land. Ain't it not part of the reservation? First come, first served. And the railroad needs water. The town needs water. He has got Pike to sign off on it. Says it is a matter of public safety, especially now, with the Navajo on the warpath." It all clicked into place. The raid was the excuse. The dead men were the price. The water was the prize. She knew that spring. It was not just a trickle. It was a lifeblood. It fed the grazing lands for the Navajo herds. It was the only reliable water for 10 miles in any direction. If McGraw dammed it, he would not just be building a reservoir for the town. He would be holding a knife to the throat of the Dun. And the town, he would own their water, too. He would own everything. She was staring at a sack of pinto beans, her mind racing, when the bell on her shop door jangled again. "It was him, Inez." He stood in the doorway, and the entire shop seemed to fall silent and still. He was not dressed as a scout today. He wore a clean cotton shirt, his black hair tied back with a simple leather thong. He did not look at the shelves, at the goods, or at the rifle she kept behind the counter. He just looked at her. "The elder," he said, his voice low and formal. "Hastian Yazi. He asks you to come." Claire's heart hammered. "Come where? Why?" "He has heard you were in the canyon. He asks to speak with you. He is a man who listens." Kai's gaze was steady, holding no judgment, only weight. I cannot. The town it is not safe for you, or for me to be seen with you." "He knows this," Kai said, as if that settled the matter. "He knows the sheriff is gathering snakes. That is why he asks. I will wait outside, at sundown." He did not wait for her answer. He simply turned and was gone. Claire spent the next few hours in a state of suspended terror. She told Eli she was sick, a headache, and asked him to close the shop. He looked at her with worry, but he obeyed. She argued with herself. To go was madness. It was siding with them, against the town, against the law, but not to go. Not to go felt like a different kind of cowardice. Rosa's words echoed in her head. This truth has teeth. At sundown. She slipped out the back. She did not take a mule. She walked, keeping to the shadows, moving toward the high mesas. He was there, exactly where he said he would be. A shadow among shadows. He did not speak, just turned and started to walk. She followed. He led her on a path she would never have found, up a switchback and into a small, sheltered clearing where a dozen or so Navajo men and women sat. Hastian Yazi was at the center, an old man with a face like carved cedar. There was no fire. They sat in the fading purple light of the desert evening. Claire felt intensely, painfully white. She was an intruder, a representative of the people who were, at that very moment, planning to hunt them. She stood awkwardly until Hastian Yazi gestured to a blanket. She sat. The elder spoke for a long time in his own language. It was soft, rhythmic, like water running over stones. Claire did not understand a word, but she understood the feeling. It was not anger. It was a deep, profound sorrow and a resilient strength. When he finished, there was a long silence. All eyes turned to her. Kainez stepped forward. He stood beside the elder. "He says," Kai translated, his voice as quiet as the air, "that the water is not for one man to own. He says it is the blood of the earth, and it is for all who thirst, the white man, the dine, the deer, the snake. It is for all." He paused, his eyes finding hers in the dusk. "He says the railroad man, McGraw, wants to drink all the blood." Claire's throat was dry. Tell him I know. I heard the rumors, about the spring, about the petition." Kai translated. The elder nodded slowly. He spoke again. "He asks what you saw in the canyon." Kai said. Claire's heart stopped. She looked at the faces around her. They were not accusing. They were just waiting. They were farmers, weavers, mothers, shepherds. "I saw," Claire said, her voice trembling. "I saw white men, dressed as riders. They attacked the coach. They killed the drivers. They were waiting for Sheriff Pike. It was a lie. All of it." She saw a few women draw their blankets tighter. A man's hand tightened on his knee. Kai translated. Hastian Yazi listened, his eyes never leaving Claire's face. He spoke a final, short sentence. "He says," Kai said, "that your camera captures the light, and the light is truth. He asks what you will do with your truth." Claire had no answer. She looked down at her hands. She was not a warrior. She was not a lawmaker. She was a shopkeeper with a mortgage. Tell him I am afraid." Kai did not translate this. He did not need to. The old man nodded, as if she had spoken. "He says," Kai said, his voice softening just a fraction, "that we are all afraid of the fire, but we must still carry the water." Claire returned to her shop in the dark. The walk back was a blur. She felt changed, as if her bones had been rearranged. This was not about a news story. This was not about justice in the abstract. This was about survival. It was about men, women, and children who would thirst because Silas McGraw wanted to get rich. When she reached her back door, she knew what she had to do, but she was not fast enough. When she stepped inside, they were waiting for her. 2 men, sitting on her coffee sacks as if they owned them. They were not the hard-faced riders from the canyon. These men were worse. They were clean-shaven, wore dark suits, and smelled of expensive cigars. "Miss Bennett," the first one said, smiling. He did not stand up. "We have been waiting, my associate and I. We represent an Eastern concern, interested in investing in Dusty Bend." Claire's hand flew to her throat. "The shop is closed." "We know," the second man said. He had a ledger in his lap. "We are here to make you an offer, a very generous one. We hear you hold the mortgage on this establishment. We are prepared to buy it from you at, let us say, 5 times its actual value. Cash, tonight." Claire's blood ran cold. "It is not for sale." The first man's smile did not falter, but his eyes went flat. "I think you misunderstand. Miss Bennett, this is not a negotiation. This is a recommendation. Mr. McGraw, our employer, feels you are unsuited for the pressures of frontier commerce. He feels you would be happier elsewhere. And if I say no..." The man finally stood up. He was very tall. He walked over to her display of tintypes, the portraits of miners and their families. He picked one up. "It is a dangerous world. Miss Bennett, fires happen, accidents. People get hurt. You have a brother, do you not? The postal rider, Eli. Such a young man. It would be a tragedy if he were to have an accident out there, all alone." He placed the tintype down, very gently. "You have until morning to accept our offer. One of our men will be by." He tipped his hat. "A pleasure doing business with you." They let themselves out the front door. Claire stood in the absolute silence, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. The fear she had felt before was a pale, thin thing. This was a cold, heavy dread. They had threatened Eli. They had threatened her home. She looked around the shop, at the bolts of cloth, the sacks of beans, the life she had scraped together. It was all so fragile. Then her eyes fell on the dark room door. She thought of Rosa's anger. She thought of Hasty and Yazzy's quiet dignity. She thought of Kai Nez, his eyes asking, "What will you do with your truth?" The fear was still there. It was a cold, sick weight in her stomach. But something else was there now, too, a rage, hard as iron, sharp as broken glass. They thought they could buy her. They thought they could scare her. They thought they could take her truth and twist it into a lie to steal a spring and kill a people. She walked to the front door and threw the heavy iron bolt. She went to the back door and did the same. Then she walked into her dark room, the red light embracing her like a confession. She took the plate holder from the shelf. Her hands were no longer shaking. She began, with methodical, precise movements, to mix the developer. The acrid smell of the chemicals filled the small room. She was going to see the truth, and then, God help her, she was going to show it. Eli found her in the dark room. He had returned from his postal route, his face smeared with dust and youthful worry. He saw the bolted front door, the heavy silence of the shop, and had come straight to the back. "Claire, what is happening? The whole town is crazy. Pike is buying drinks for his posse, and those men you said were here, the ones in the suits. I saw them talking to the sheriff." She was standing in the red gloom, the single safe light painting her face in crimson. She looked exhausted, but her eyes were bright with a terrible, hard light. "They threatened us, Eli. They threatened you. They want the shop. They want me silent." "Then we will be silent," Eli whispered, his voice cracking. "We will sell. We can go to California. What good is this place if we are dead?" "They will not let us sell. Eli, they will not let us leave. They will just take..." Claire held up the heavy, black plate holder. "This is from the canyon. I do not know if I captured anything. I do not know if I even took the cap off the lens, but I am going to develop it. Right now." "Claire, no. If they find out—" "They already suspect." Her voice was firm. "They threatened you to stop me. It did not work. Now, hold the developing tray. Your hands are steadier than mine." He hesitated. He was 19 years old. He wanted to deliver mail and dream of the pretty telegraph girl. He did not want this, but he looked at his sister, standing alone in the red light, and his fear turned to a younger, stronger loyalty. He took the tray. She slid the heavy glass plate from its holder, her movements precise, practiced, even though her heart was trying to beat its way through her ribs. She submerged it in the acrid, metallic-smelling developer. "Gently," she whispered, mostly to herself. "Rock it, back and forth. Keep the liquid moving." They stood in silence, the only sound the soft slosh of chemicals. The air was thick. 1 minute passed, then 2. I see something," Eli breathed. A faint image, a ghost, was blooming on the glass. The black of the sky became pale. The bright rock of the canyon turned dark. It was a negative, the world inverted. "It is there," Claire said, her voice tight with a painful hope. "I took the picture." The image sharpened, resolving itself. The overturned stagecoach, the dead horses, the spilled cargo. "Look," Eli pointed, his finger trembling. "That crate, the one that fell off. There is writing on it." Claire leaned close, her eyes straining in the dim red light. It was there, unmistakable, even in negative, the stylized, arrogant M of the McGraw Railroad Company. Pike's lie that this was a Navajo raid on a rival's shipment was instantly undone. It was McGraw's own coach. "But Claire," Eli whispered, "that does not prove anything. He will just say they stole his coach." "Wait." Claire's eyes scanned the rest of the plate, her photographer's brain analyzing the light, the shadows, the angles. "Look at the other crate, the one still attached to the wreckage, the one Pike claimed the Navajo shot full of holes." "What about it?" "The bullet holes." She tapped the glass. "Look at the splinters, the light. The splinters are pushed out, not in. They are facing the camera." Eli squinted. He did not understand. So, Claire said, her voice dropping. "The bullets were fired from inside the crate. It was not an attack. Eli, it was a self-contained explosion, a detonation. They blew the cargo open themselves, and then they shot the drivers to make it look like a fight." The full, monstrous truth settled between them. A staged massacre, a conspiracy to incite a war, all for a spring. Eli looked like he was going to be sick. "Claire, we have to burn this now. They will kill us." "No," Claire said. She lifted the plate and plunged it into the fixer, the chemical bath that would make the image permanent, unchangeable. "We are going to make it permanent, and then we are going to use it." Morning brought a sharp, unwelcome clarity. Claire had not slept. She had washed the plate, dried it, and wrapped it in her mother's softest silk shawl. She hid the bundle in the bottom of a large bin of dried pinto beans, a place no man would likely search. She and Eli opened the shop as normal, a desperate attempt at pretending nothing had changed. The air in the store was thick with their unspoken terror. Just after 8 o'clock, the bell jangled, and the door was kicked open. Sheriff Amos Pike filled the doorway, his 2 deputies flanking him. His easy charm was gone, replaced by a flat, official arrogance. "Mornin', Miss Bennett. Mr. Bennett?" He touched the brim of his hat, a gesture of pure mockery. "I have a warrant to search these premises." Claire's hand flew to her throat, but she kept her voice steady. "A warrant for what? Sheriff?" "Information has been received," Pike said, walking past her, his spurs ringing on her clean floorboards. that you might be in possession of certain items. Items that are pertinent to the ongoing investigation of the savage attack on Mr. McGraw's coach. He smiled, a cold, thin expression. We also have reports you were seen consorting with the enemy out near the reservation. That is a vicious lie, Eli snapped, stepping forward. Pike's hand, almost casually, shoved Eli back against a shelf. Sacks of flour tumbled. You speak when you are spoken to. Boy, now, where is it? Where is what? Claire demanded, moving to stand in front of her brother. The camera, Pike said, his eyes narrowing. The one you had in the canyon. It is evidence. It was broken, Claire said, her heart hammering. I left it. It was too heavy to carry. A shame, Pike said, not believing her for a second. I suppose we will just have to look for ourselves. Boys, tear this place apart. They did. They were not searching. They were destroying. They pulled bolts of calico from the shelves, overturned barrels, shattered jars of preserves. They were looking for something small. They were looking for a glass plate. One deputy moved toward the back. What is in here? Sheriff, the dark room. My chemicals, Claire cried, lunging forward. You cannot. A spark. It could be explosive. Get out of her way, ma'am, the deputy said, pushing her aside. Just as he reached for the dark room door, a woman screamed in the street. It was a high, piercing sound, full of terror. Fire, a voice bellowed. Fire at the stables. The whole place is going up. Pike swore. A long, complex oath. He hated being interrupted. He looked at the dark room, at Claire's pale, defiant face, and then at the smoke already starting to cloud the street outside. This ain't over, he snarled, shoving his way out the door, his deputies scrambling after him. Not by a long shot. Claire sagged against the counter, her shop a ruin around her. A moment later, Rosa Delgado slipped in through the back door, her face impassive. Did I miss the party? Rosa asked, picking up a tin of peaches. The fire, Claire breathed. A little damp hay, a match, and a very loud scream. It works every time, Rosa said, her eyes flashing. But it will not work twice. He knows, Claire, or he guesses, that truth of yours. It is not safe here. I know, Claire whispered. Rosa looked at the destruction, her lips tightening. And McGraw has hired new men. I saw them at the saloon. They do not look like riders. They look like clerks from the city. They wear derby hats and they drink whiskey without making a face. They are Pinkertons, and the story they are telling is that you were in on the raid, that you are a traitor. The cage was closing. They were not just trying to silence her. They were painting her as the enemy. She was packing a small bag when he came. The light was gone, the shop lit by a single, guttering candle. He did not knock. He was just there, a shadow in the alley, making no sound. Kai Nez. His presence did not startle her this time. It felt inevitable. He is coming back, Kai said. It was not a question. Yes, or he will send his new men. The Pinkertons, Kai said, confirming Rosa's fears. They are wolves who wear sheep's clothing. They are building a lie for the town to believe. I have the plate, Claire said. She held up the small, cloth-wrapped bundle she had rescued from the beans. I have the truth, but I do not know what to do with it. His dark eyes rested on the bundle. Hasty and Yazzie. He will know. He will see it. We must go. Now. This was it, the step she could not take back. She looked at Eli, who was sweeping up broken glass in the corner, his face pale and grim. Go, Eli said, not looking at her. He is right. Get it out of here. I will watch the shop. No, they will hurt you, Claire said, panic rising. They will not, Kai said, his voice flat. Because he is not staying here. He will go to the Delgado Ranch. Rosa is waiting." Claire looked at him, surprised. He had arranged this. "Go, Eli," she commanded, her voice shaking. "Be safe." Eli nodded, gave her one last terrified look, and slipped out the back. Claire turned to Kai. "All right." The journey was a blur of shadows and silence. He led her away from the roads, up through the dry washes and game trails that only his people knew. The desert at night was not the empty, dead place she photographed. It was alive. She could hear the skitter of a lizard, the distant cough of a fox, the hoot of an owl. Kai moved like water flowing over rocks. She, in her heavy boots and skirts, felt clumsy, loud, a breakage in the landscape. He stopped once, crouching. He held up a hand for silence. He pointed to a small, almost invisible scrape in the dirt. "What is it?" she whispered. "A man, heavy. He passed this way an hour ago. He drags his left foot." She stared at the dirt. "Seeing nothing, how can you possibly know that?" "You read your light," he said, standing. "I read the earth. It is the same." She found herself, in a low voice, trying to explain her world to him. "It is not magic. It is chemistry. Silver nitrate. It reacts to the light. The light burns the shadow of the world onto the glass. It cannot lie." Kai was silent for a long time as they walked. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. "My grandfather said the truth is a shadow. You cannot catch it, but you can see its shape. Your glass. It holds the shape." A strange respect was growing between them, a bridge made of two different kinds of observation. She was still terrified of him, of the coiled stillness that seemed ready to explode into violence. And she was aware of him, of his proximity in the darkness. She told herself it was just gratitude, just the fear of being alone. She was not a foolish girl to be swayed by a handsome, dangerous man. She was a woman fighting for her life. Kai, for his part, felt her presence as a sharp, unwelcome responsibility. She was white. She was from the town that was, at this moment, planning his people's starvation. But she carried Hastian's shadow of the truth. He had to protect her. But as he listened to her, her voice low and intelligent in the darkness, he felt a strange, unwelcome curiosity. She saw the world in a way he did not understand. He worried. He had brought her into his world, and in his world, people like her died. They reached the cluster of hogans just before the moon set. Hastian Yazzie was waiting for her, as if he had known the exact moment she would arrive. He did not look at the plate. He looked at Claire. He listened as Kai translated her story. The raid, the bullet holes, the Pinkertons, the threat to Eli. When she was finished, the old man spoke. Kai translated, his face formal. "Hastian Yazzie thanks you. He says the light you have captured is a strong spirit. It has come to help us. Tomorrow, the town council meets. McGraw will ask for the water. He will use his Navajo raid as the reason. He will say the town needs his protection, his progress." "They will believe him," Claire said, her voice bitter. "No," Kai said, "because you will be there, and you will show them the shadow." The old man spoke again, his voice soft but firm. "He offers a trade," Kai said, "a fair one. You will give us this glass, to use at the council. You will speak your truth. In return, Hastian Yazzie offers you the protection of his people. You and your brother. McGraw's men will not touch you. My warriors will be your shadows. You will be, one of us, in this fight." Claire looked at the old man, at the quiet, strong faces around the fire. An army. He was offering her an army. "Tell him yes," she said, her voice not shaking. They returned to Dusty Bend before dawn. A strange calm had settled over Claire. She had allies. The town meeting was set for noon. Eli had returned, his face pale but resolute, flanked by two of Kai's men who had melted into the alleys. The morning was still, too still. Just before noon, Eli went to the back shed to get the wagon harness. "Claire!" His scream was not terror. It was pure rage. She ran out the back door, the small wooden shed where she stored her spare chemicals, her packing crates, and all her old, flawed, useless glass plates. It was an inferno. Black, acrid smoke billowed into the bright Arizona sky. Across the street, one of the new, clean-shaven Pinkerton agents stood watching. He was not smiling. He was just observing, as if ticking an item off a list. They were not trying to kill her. They were trying to destroy her proof. Claire looked at the fire, at the man, and then back at the shop. The man had a fatal flaw in his logic. He assumed the evidence was in the shed. But Claire, the practical, meticulous photographer, always kept her most valuable plate where she could find it. It was inside, wrapped in its silk shawl, hidden in the pinto beans, waiting for the meeting. The fire was a warning, but it was too late. The light was already trapped. The black smoke clawing at the sky was a personal violation. It was not just her shed. It was her memories, her failed experiments, her foothold. Eli's scream tore through the morning, a sound of pure, boyish rage. "Claire, the shed." She was already moving, her heart a cold knot of dread. The small wooden structure was an inferno, flames licking at the dry pine boards. And inside that fire, was her wooden chest. The chest held all her old glass negatives, the landscapes, the portraits, the failures, and, wrapped in a simple cloth at the very bottom, 2 extra plates from the canyon. One was the wide-angle shot she had taken before the ambush. The other was the close-up of the stagecoach, the one she had hidden from herself, the one that showed the McGraw logo. She had lied to Eli. She had told him the plate was in the beans, to calm him. But it was not. She could not bear to have it in the shop, a magnet for Pike's violence. She had hidden it in the shed, among the hundreds of other glass plates, thinking it was the safest place, a place no one would think to look. Now it was burning. "No!" she screamed, lunging toward the door, the heat hitting her face like a physical blow. Eli grabbed her. "Claire, you cannot. It is gone." "The box," she cried, fighting him. "My plates, my evidence, it is in there." A shadow moved, fast as a hawk, and Kai Nez was there. He had appeared from the alley, his face a mask of grim understanding. He saw the fire, he saw her, and he understood. "Where?" he demanded, his voice a low growl. "Inside, to the right, a wooden chest." He did not hesitate. He ripped his own heavy wool coat from his shoulders, plunged it into the horse trough by the back door, and wrapped the soaking, steaming wool around his right arm and head. "Kai, no!" she screamed, but he was already gone, a dark shape disappearing into the rolling, black smoke. She heard a crash, the sound of him kicking the chest. The fire roared, a hungry, living thing. He emerged, stumbling, half dragging the heavy, smoldering wooden box. He was coughing, his eyes streaming. He kicked the chest open, and a wave of heat rolled out. The plates on top were cracked, melting, the images turning to black glass. "It is at the bottom," Claire sobbed, plunging her own hands into the chest, ignoring the searing heat on the wooden handles of the plate box. She grabbed the small, silk-wrapped bundle. The silk was scorched. Her hands screamed in protest, the skin of her palms and fingers blistering, but she did not let go. Kai pulled her back, his hand clamping on her arm, as the shed roof collapsed with a sound like a cannon. She fell to her knees in the dust, clutching the precious, blessedly intact glass plates. Her hands were on fire. She was shaking so violently she could barely breathe. Kai knelt beside her. He was breathing hard. He looked at her hands, raw and red, and then at the plates. His eyes held a new, complex light. It was not admiration. It was a kind of pained acknowledgement. He had seen her fear, and now he had seen her courage. "They burned," Claire whispered, her voice thick with shock. My hands." The skin is broken, Kai said, his voice rough. But the glass is not. You have your truth. Rosa ran up then, a bucket in her hand, her face a mask of fury. She stopped when she saw Claire's hands. Madre, they did this. They will pay for this. She gently took the plates from Claire's trembling, ruined grip. Go, the meeting. I will watch for more snakes. Eli, his face pale, ran to her. Claire, your hands. I am fine, she lied. I am fine. It is just a burn. Eli, I need you to get word to Hastian. Tell him I have the second plate, the wide angle. Tell him I am bringing both. I will ride now, he said, his voice low and angry. No, Kai said, his voice sharp. He was looking, not at them, but at the Pinkerton agent, who was still across the street, watching, his face devoid of all expression. You will not ride? You will walk to the livery. Do not run. They are watching you. Eli nodded, his jaw set. He looked like a man now. He turned and walked, forcing himself into a calm, measured pace, heading toward the stables. Claire and Kai went inside. She plunged her hands into a basin of cool water, a ragged gasp escaping her lips as the pain hit. Kai stood by the window, a silent, buckskin-clad sentinel. They did not get it, Claire said, her voice shaking. They failed. They will not fail again. Kai said, this is not the end. This is the beginning. He was right. Eli had been gone for 10 minutes. Too long. They heard a scuffle in the alley. A single, muffled grunt. Kai was out the back door before Claire could even process the sound. She was right behind him, her wet hands wrapped in a towel. Eli was on the ground, his face bloody. A man was standing over him, his boot raised to kick him again. He was not one of the Pinkertons. He was one of McGraw's local thugs, a man named Sipes, known for his love of bar fights. Get up, male boy, Sipes snarled. You are going to tell me what your sister is planning. Kai moved. He did not make a sound. He was a blur of motion. He hit Sipes from the side, a low, brutal tackle that sent the larger man crashing into a stack of crates. Sipes scrambled, pulling for his gun. But Kai was on him, his long knife suddenly in his hand. The blade pressed against the man's throat. Do not! Kai's voice was barely a whisper, but it was more terrifying than a shout. I was just... Sipes babbled, his eyes wide with terror. A shot exploded. It was not from Kai. Rosa Delgado was standing at the end of the alley, her long-barreled Colt in her hand, a small, neat hole smoking in the wooden rain barrel just inches from Sipes' head. His hand was moving, Rosa said, her voice lazy, as if she were commenting on the weather. She did not lower the gun. It looked like it was moving toward his holster. You saw that, did you not? Claire. Sipes froze, all the bluster gone. He tried to kill my brother, Claire said, her voice shaking with rage. She walked over to the man. She was looking at the ground. You bleed on my floor, she whispered. Sipes looked at her, confused. What? Claire pointed. Sipes had stumbled back into the shop's doorway, and on the clean, pine floorboards, he had left a perfect, terrible print from his boot. It was not just dirt. It was a thick, greasy smear of lamp oil and soot from the fire. He had been there. He had set the fire, and then he had waited to attack Eli. Rosa, Claire said, her voice deadly calm. Keep him still. Kai, help my brother. I need my other camera. It took her 5 minutes. She used her small, portable tin-type camera, the one she used for quick portraits at the county fair. She set it on a stool. She lit an oil lamp, not for the oil, but for the bright, steady light. She focused on the boot print. She took the cap off, counted to 30, and put it back on. She developed the small metal plate right there in the alley, her burned hands fumbling with the chemicals. It was perfect, a perfect, greasy boot print, with a distinctive nick in the heel. Kai tied Sipes to a chair. Rosa kept her gun on him. "The meeting," Claire said, looking at the tintype. "It is time." The town hall was packed. It was not a hall. It was the saloon, the only building big enough. Silas McGraw was at the front, flanked by his 2 Pinkerton agents, looking every bit the civilized captain of industry. Sheriff Pike was beside him, his star polished, his face a mask of grim duty. Pike was speaking. "And that is why, in the interest of public safety, in the wake of this unprovoked savagery, I am seconding Mr. McGraw's petition to secure the Tubilnee Spring. He will build a reservoir. He will protect our water. He will protect us." "He is lying," Claire's voice cut through the murmuring crowd. She walked forward, her burned hands wrapped in white cotton bandages. Eli was at her side, his face bruised but proud. Kai and Rosa flanked them, followed by Hasty and Yazzie and a dozen Navajo, who stood, silent and dignified, in the doorway. All eyes went to Claire. "That is a bold accusation, Miss Bennett," McGraw said, his voice a silken, dangerous purr. "Especially from someone who consorts with the very savages who attacked my coach. The men who attacked your coach were your men," Claire said, her voice ringing. She held up the large glass plate, the one from the canyon. "I have proof. I have a photograph." A gasp went through the room. Pike laughed. "A photograph, ma'am. You are delusional. And even if you did, what does it prove? A picture of a broken wagon." "It proves," Claire said, her voice trembling but gaining strength, "that it was your coach, Mr. McGraw." She held the plate up to the light of the window. "It shows your company logo on a crate, and it shows that the bullet holes were fired from inside the cargo, not outside." The room was silent. Pike sneered. That is absurd. You could have taken that picture anywhere. That is not the canyon. That is a fake." "I was hoping you would say that," Claire said. She held up the second glass plate, the wide-angle shot. "This is the photograph I took just before the attack. As you can see," she pointed, "there is the coach, and there is the distinctive sleeping man rock formation. And there is my broken camera. It proves the location. It proves the time. It proves you are a liar." The crowd murmured. Turning to look at Pike, the sheriff's face was a mottled red. Silas McGraw stood up. He clapped, a slow, mocking sound. "Bravo, Miss Bennett. A truly theatrical performance. You have a photograph of my coach at a location. What does this prove? Nothing. Except that my property was destroyed." He smiled, a wolf's smile. "But this is all irrelevant. The attack, tragic as it was, is not the point. The point is the water. And the fact is, the Navajo have no legal claim to it. But I do." He produced a document from his coat, unrolling it with a flourish. "A treaty, a bill of sale, signed just last week by the leaders of the local tribe, granting me exclusive water rights in exchange for concessions." He handed it to the mayor. "It is all legal." Hasty and Yazzie stepped forward. Kai was at his side. The old man looked at the document. He did not touch it. He spoke, his voice quiet, yet it filled the room. Kai translated. "He says this paper is a lie." "Are you calling me a liar, old man?" McGraw boomed. "No," Kai said. "He is calling your paper a liar. He says the name here, Hastian." Kai pointed to the scrawled signature. "Is not a name. It is a title. It means man or elder. It is like signing a paper. Mr. He says the second name is the Navajo word for blue coyote." A ripple of nervous laughter went through the crowd. "He says," Kai continued, his voice hard, "that the dying do not sign paper. Our word is given in ceremony, with smoke, with pollen. We have shared this water for 1,000 years. We have never sold it. This paper means nothing. It is a child's drawing." Hastian spoke one final sentence. "He says," Kai translated, his eyes locking on McGraw's, "that the water is for all, and you are a man who would drink the world dry and still be thirsty." The tide had turned. The townsfolk were murmuring, looking at McGraw with open suspicion. Silas McGraw's face was no longer civilized. It was a mask of pure, reptilian rage. He had been beaten. He had been humiliated. He rolled up his document. This is not over. This is not a discussion. I am building that reservoir. My petition is filed." He stabbed a finger at Pike. "And the law supports me." He turned to his Pinkerton men. "We are done here. Get the crew. Get the dynamite." He looked back at the crowd, at Claire, at Hastian. "You want to talk about laws? Fine. The law of the frontier. Possession. I will take that water. I will take it. Tonight." He stalked out of the saloon, his men behind him. A terrible, cold silence fell on the room. He had lost the argument, so he was abandoning it. He was moving to force. The stakes were no longer about paper. They were about gunpowder, and they had until sundown. The summer air was thick and hot, and the town, Claire realized, was about to die of thirst or die in a fight. The saloon emptied with a cold, heavy dread. McGraw's threat hung in the air, thick and oily as the smoke from Claire's ruined shed. He had not just declared war. He had given them a deadline. Tonight. There was no time for shock. They gathered in the wreckage of Claire's shop, the four of them. A strange, desperate alliance, a photographer with burned hands, a Navajo scout, a Mexican vaquera, and a 19-year-old postal rider. "He is going for the spring," Kai said, his voice flat. He was already checking his rifle. "His men will use dynamite. It is the fastest way to dam the Narrows." "He has to be stopped," Eli said, his voice hard. The boy was gone, replaced by a man. "We will stop him," Rosa said, spinning the cylinder of her Colt. "I will put a bullet in his civilized throat." "No," Kai said, his eyes on Rosa. "Not him. The dynamite. His men are mules. He is the snake. But tonight the water is the only life. I will take my men. We will stop the explosives." Claire looked at her bandaged hands, the cotton already gray with soot. "That is not enough. You can stop him tonight, but he will come back tomorrow. With the law, with the army. He has the petition. He has the power." "So what?" Rosa spat. "So," Claire said, her mind working with the cold, clear logic of a chemical bath. "We have to prove he is not just a tyrant. We have to prove he is a liar. To everyone, to the town, to the territorial government." She looked at Kai. "He is not diverting the water for the town, is he? The petition is a lie?" Kai's gaze was steady. His survey lines do not go toward Dusty Bend. They go west, toward the canyons, toward his new silver claim. "The map," Claire breathed. "He must have a map, a real one, the one that proves he is stealing the water for his own mine, not for the town." A new plan formed, born of desperation and fire. It was insane. It was necessary. "Kai," Claire said, her voice finding a new, hard edge. "You stop the dynamite. You do whatever you have to do, but you save that spring." He nodded, a single sharp dip of his chin. "Rosa, Eli, I need you. I am going into his camp." "You are what?" Eli almost shouted. "His field office, the big tent at the railroad camp. He will have his papers there. His maps, his ledgers." She held up her bandaged hands. "I cannot use my big camera, but I still have the tintype. I can make one plate that proves he is betraying the entire town, not just the Navajo." "It is a suicide," Rosa said, but her eyes were gleaming. "Which is why I need you." Claire continued, "I need a diversion, a loud one, and I need a way out." "And the chemicals," Eli said, his mind catching up. A tintype has to be developed now. You cannot wait. Exactly. Claire pointed to the small, heavy box of portable chemicals Eli had saved from the shed. You and Rosa, you get me in, and you get me out, and you bring the darkroom with you. The plan was set. They had less than 6 hours. The wind started just after dusk. It was not a breeze. It was a sigh from the desert, a warning. By the time they rode out, the world was obscured by a growing curtain of red dust. They split. Kai and his warriors, lean shadows on horseback, disappeared into the growing gale, heading for the high spring at Tubilani. Claire, Rosa, and Eli headed for the railroad camp. The sandstorm was a monster. It was a living, breathing thing, a wall of grit that choked the lungs and tore at the eyes. The wind screamed, a high, thin sound that erased all other noise. Claire was lost within 10 minutes. She could not see Rosa, who was only 10 feet ahead. She could not see the horizon. She could see nothing but a swirling, suffocating, crimson hell. Panic, cold and sharp, rose in her throat. She was blind. And then she heard it. The wind was a living devil, trying to peel the skin from their bones. It had scoured the world clean, leaving only grit and chaos. The night had been a blur of failures and fractured victories. Kai had saved the spring, but the man named Jensen, the mercenary leader, had vanished into the storm. Claire had the tintype, her map, her proof, but Pike was now actively hunting her, no longer bothering with the pretense of law. Kai found her huddled behind the same boulder where this had all begun, her horse and Eli's gone, scattered by Rosa's diversion. He had appeared from the red dust like a spirit, his face a mask of exhaustion and sand. He did not speak. He simply grabbed her good arm, the one not seared by the fire, and pulled her up. He led her, not toward the town, but deeper into the rock, toward a sheer face of red cliff. The storm was still screaming, a high, thin sound that felt like it was inside her skull. He pushed aside a curtain of old, dry brush, revealing a crack in the rock. It was a shelter, a small, wind-carved hollow no bigger than a wagon bed, improved by some long-dead shepherd with a low wall of stacked stones. It was not much, but it was out of the wind. Claire stumbled inside, her knees buckling. She collapsed onto the sandy floor. Kai followed, slumping against the opposite wall. For a long time, they just breathed. The only sound was the muffled howl of the sandstorm and the ragged, painful rasp of their own lungs. They were two people at the end of the world, exhausted, scratched, caked in a paste of red mud and sweat, but they were alive. They were, for this one, stolen moment, safe. Claire was shaking, not from cold, but from shock, the adrenaline that had carried her through the camp, through the confrontation with Pike, was gone, leaving a hollow, aching void. Her dress was a ruin. The thick cotton was torn at the shoulder, ripped at the hem and stiff with drying chemical stains and dirt. Sand was embedded in every fiber, in her hair, her ears, her mouth, and it was in her wounds. Her bandaged hands were a throbbing, useless agony, but it was the cut on her side, where Pike had shoved her against the wagon wheel. That was burning. She could feel the grit grinding into the raw flesh under her clothes. She looked at Kai. He was watching her, his face unreadable in the deep gloom. His rifle was across his lap. He had not let it go. He was bleeding from a long gash on his cheekbone where a rock, thrown by the wind, had struck him. "You are hurt," he said. His voice was a low rasp, thick with dust. You are bleeding," she whispered back. He touched his cheek, his fingers coming away dark. He seemed surprised, as if he had forgotten. He wiped the blood on his buckskin pants. "It is nothing." He looked at her side, where her hand was pressed. "You." "Sand," she said, her voice small. "It is. In the cut. It burns." He said nothing, But his eyes, they were no longer the eyes of the warrior. The scout, they were the eyes of a man, watching a woman in pain. He had seen her run into a burning shed for a piece of glass. He had seen her stand up to a room full of angry men. And now he saw her, shaking, trying not to cry. In a stone hut, he was a man of his people. He respected her privacy. He looked away, toward the small opening, at the red curtain of the storm. Claire knew what she had to do. It was practical. It was necessary. But it felt, in this small, charged space, like a different kind of surrender. Her burned hands were clumsy. She fumbled with the buttons at her throat, her bandaged fingers unable to grip. A small, frustrated sob escaped her. She looked at him, his back still to her. "I cannot— the buttons," she whispered. He turned, slowly. He looked at her fumbling, useless hands, and then at her face. His gaze was steady. He had made a choice. In the canyon, to save her. He had made a choice. At the shed, to help her. He was making another one now. He moved, kneeling in front of her. The space was so small, his knees were almost touching hers. He did not speak. He just lifted his hands. His own fingers scraped raw, and gently, so gently, he began to work the small, cloth-covered buttons on her dress. His touch was not a caress. It was a service. It was practical, but it was the most intimate thing she had ever known. He was careful of her burned hands, careful of her. His gaze focused on the task. One button, then two. The dress gaped open at her collar. She was trembling, but the fear was different now. It was not fear of him. It was fear of this quiet, this trust. This was the thing she had run from. The thing she believed would cage her, the way it had caged her mother. She had to clean the wound. She had to get the dress off. But it was more than that. The dress itself, this symbol of her old life, her civilized, fearful, practical life. It was a prison. It was a lie. She looked at him, his head bent, his dark hair falling forward, his hands working the third button. "Tear my dress," she whispered. His hands stopped. He looked up. His dark eyes, inches from hers, searched her face. He had not misunderstood. She was not asking him to rip her clothes in a fit of passion. She was asking him to help her destroy the shell she had been living in. She was giving him permission, not just to her body, but to her fear. His face was hard, his own emotions held in a brutal check. He saw the tracks of tears, clean lines through the dust on her cheeks. He saw the blisters on her hands. He saw the woman who had, in the span of one day, become a warrior in her own right. His voice was a low growl, thick with an emotion she could not name. It was raw, and it was a promise. "Darlin," he said, the word a shock, a sudden, rough endearment. "I'll burn with you tonight." It was not a threat. It was an oath. He was not talking about passion. He was talking about her fire, her truth. He was saying he would stand with her in the inferno. He would not let her burn alone. He did not tear the dress. He finished the buttons, his movements still economical, still respectful. He peeled the torn, stiff fabric off her shoulders. Her chemise beneath was thin, and she wrapped her arms around herself. He looked at the raw, bleeding scrape on her side. He took his own waterskin, uncapped it, and poured a small, precious amount of water onto his neckerchief. He handed it to her. "Clean it," he commanded, his voice gentle, but still a command. And he turned his back, giving her the privacy she needed. She cleaned the wound, the water stinging, but it was a clean pain. When she was done, she was shivering, the chemise damp. "It is clean," she said. He turned, he looked at her, and she at him. Two people, stripped bare, not of their clothes, but of their pretenses. They were just a man and a woman who had seen the truth in each other. He sat beside her, not against the opposite wall. Their shoulders touched. The heat from his body was a solid, comforting thing in the howling dark. She leaned her head, heavy with exhaustion, against his shoulder. He did not flinch. He did not move. He just sat, a solid rock in the storm. His hand found hers, not the bandaged ones, but her left hand. His fingers, calloused and strong, closed around hers. They sat like that for hours. They listened to the wind die. They felt the air grow still. The dust began to settle. It was a truce. It was a promise. It was, in its own fierce, Western way, a consummation. It was a fade to black, a shared breath in the heart of the fire. When the first pale gray light of dawn filtered into the shelter, they were still sitting up, her head on his shoulder. They had not slept. They had rested. "My mother," Claire said, her voice a dry whisper in the new quiet. "She died of cholera. On the trail. I was 15. I held her hand, and I watched my father just dissolve. He loved her. You see, he loved her so much that when she was gone, he was gone too. He just gave up. I swore I would never let anyone do that to me. I would never be owned. I would never be that weak." Kai was silent for a long time. He turned his head, his cheek brushing her hair. My grandfather," he said, his voice rough. "He was a great man, a singer. He knew the ceremonies, the songs to bring the rain, the songs to heal. When the soldiers came, the long walk, he watched his children die. His wife, he stopped singing. He said the songs were broken. He taught me to be a scout, to use a rifle. He taught me to watch, but he never taught me to sing. He said the white man had burned the songs." He let go of her hand and stood up, moving to the entrance of the shelter. He looked out at the new, clean, scoured world. "He was wrong," Kai said, his voice quiet. "The songs are not burned. They are just waiting, like your truth." Claire stood up, her body aching. She felt new. The fear was still there, but it was not her master. It was just a fact, like the pull of gravity. "McGraw," she said. "He will not stop. Pike, Jensen, they will be hunting us." "Let them hunt," Kai said. He turned to face her. The light was on his face. "We will not run." "No," she said. "We will not run." She went to the ruined pile of her dress, still on the floor. "We will fight. With this." She picked up the small, metal tin type of the map. "You saved the water, but he will just come back. We have to show the town, the world, who he is. We have to show them he is a thief." "He will come with his law," Kai said, "with his paper." "And we will come with ours," Claire said. She looked at the tintype, then at her own hands. She needed to protect this. This was the new truth. She picked up the ragged, torn bodice of her dress, the fine, civilized cotton she had been so proud of. With her good hand and her teeth, she tore a long, thick strip from the hem. "What are you doing?" he asked. She did not answer. She went to her satchel, which had miraculously survived, and pulled out her small tin-type camera, the one she had used on the boot print. She carefully, meticulously, wrapped the tintype of the map in the cloth, and then tied the strip of her dress around the camera's strap. It was a clumsy, makeshift knot, but it held. She looked at the knot. It was a piece of her old life, her old fear, now bound to the tool of her new one. The camera, the truth. "I am binding the shadow," she said, her voice clear. "Just like you said, I am binding it to the light." Kai looked at the knot, a splash of pale blue calico against the dark leather. He looked at her, and for the first time, in the gray dawn, he smiled. It was not a large smile. It was a small, dangerous, beautiful thing. "It is time," he said. "The town is waiting to see who is stronger, his paper or your light." The high desert sun beat down on the town square. A flat, white, punishing light. The sandstorm was gone, leaving the air unnaturally clean and the sky a deep, bruised blue. Silas McGraw had not waited. He had called his hearing for 9 in the morning, right in the center of town. It was not a hearing. It was a declaration of conquest. A long table had been set up on the steps of the land office. McGraw sat there, his dark suit immaculate, flanked by his 2 silent Pinkerton agents. Sheriff Amos Pike stood below, his rifle cradled in his arms. His deputies fanned out, their hands on their holsters. They were not there to keep the peace. They were there to provide an audience for a legal execution. "The petition is filed," McGraw announced, his voice carrying in the still air. He held up a sheaf of papers. "The territorial grant is approved. My men, who were so viciously attacked by lawless elements, will begin work on the Tobill E Reservoir immediately. For the good of this town, for the future of progress." The townsfolk, thin and grim, watched. They were miners, ranchers, shopkeepers. They were trapped. They needed water, but they were terrified of this man. "That," a voice rang out, "is a lie." A path cleared. Claire Bennett walked into the center of the square. She was a ruin, and she was magnificent. She was still wearing the rags of her torn dress, her hair wild and matted with dust. Her hands were wrapped in bloody, makeshift bandages. She was walking, not like a victim, but like a general. Behind her came Kainez, his rifle in his hand, his face a mask of stone. Behind him, Hastian Yazi, his dignity a weapon. And behind them, a silent, powerful contingent of Navajo warriors, their presence a stark, quiet challenge. "Miss Bennett," McGraw sneered, his voice dripping with false pity. "You look unwell. I heard you had an accident. Perhaps you are confused." "I am not confused," Claire said, her voice clear and carrying. She stopped in the middle of the square. She was carrying her small tin-type camera, the strip of her own dress tied to its strap. "You, sir, are a thief, a liar, and a murderer, and I am here to prove it." Pike stepped forward, his face mottled with rage. "That is enough. You are under arrest, Miss Bennett, for inciting a riot for consorting with savages." "She is not alone." Another voice. Rosa Delgado, her face clean and her eyes bright with a dangerous fire. She was not on a horse. She was on foot, and she was at the head of a new army. From the east, the Mexican vaqueros, their silver conchos glittering, their faces hard. From the west, the poor miners, men with coughs and calloused hands, carrying pick handles instead of rifles. From the south, 2 white ranchers, the very men who had been on the fence, their faces grim. "We are all here, consorting. Sheriff," Rosa said, her hand on her Colt. "It seems we are all thirsty. We have come to hear what the lady has to say." The square was now a standoff. Pike's 6 deputies against everyone else. McGraw's eyes, for the first time, showed a flicker of uncertainty. He quickly recovered. "This is madness. This is mob rule. I have the law." "And I," Claire said, "have the truth." She did not address McGraw. She turned to the townsfolk. "He told you he was building a reservoir for you. He told you the Navajo were your enemies. He lied." She set her small camera on a barrel, from a satchel Eli carried. She pulled out the small, black box of her portable darkroom chemicals. Her bandaged hands fumbled, and she winced, a gasp of pain escaping her. Kai stepped forward. He did not speak. He simply took the bottles from her, his large, calloused hands becoming extensions of her will. He uncorked the developer. He poured the fixer. He did it with the same slow, methodical care he had used to unbutton her dress. He was her hands. "What is this?" the mayor asked, his voice trembling. "This," Claire said, "is a dark room. In the light, I am going to show you, all of you, what I saw." She held up the small, metal tin-type plate, the one she had taken in McGraw's tent. This is his map, the one he is hiding. With Kai's help, she submerged the plate in the developer. The crowd pressed in, silent, watching. "And while we wait for the truth to appear," Claire said, her voice rising, "Hasty Yazzie has something to say." The old man stepped forward. He did not speak English. He spoke in the soft, flowing words of the dying. He spoke of the earth as a mother, of the water as her blood, not to be owned, not to be sold, but to be shared, to be respected. He spoke of the contract as a child's lie, a piece of paper that meant nothing against 1,000 years of life. Kai translated, his voice low but carrying, each word a stone dropped into a deep well. "He says, the man who steals water steals the breath from your children's mouths. He says, the law of paper is weak, the law of the earth is strong. He asks you, which law you will live by." A man in the crowd, a miner, shouted, "That is all good, but it ain't proof McGraw's got the paper." "It is appearing," Claire said. She lifted the plate, now dark, and plunged it into the fixer. "Just 1 more minute." The air was so tense it hummed. McGraw was on his feet, his face pale. "This is a circus. Pike arrest these people." "Wait," the mayor yelled. "Let us see the picture." From the roof of the saloon, a shadow moved, a glint of sunlight on metal. He had been there the whole time, patient as a snake. Jensen, the mercenary, the man who had faced Kai at the spring. He had his orders. McGraw was losing. The witness had to be silenced. He raised his heavy Sharps rifle, the long barrel resting on the parapet. He centered the sights on the back of the woman's head, the woman with the wild hair and the bandaged hands. Kai was not looking. He was watching the crowd, his rifle held low, his body a shield for Hastian. Then his eyes moved. He was not looking for a man. He was a scout. He read the world. He saw a flicker of movement, something unnatural where it should not be. It was not the man. It was the reflection. In the horse trough, 50 yards away, a tiny, dark shape, a spot of glinting light, mirrored in the still, scummy water. It was enough. Jensen squeezed the trigger. Kai moved. He did not aim. He did not think. He fired from the hip, a single, reflexive shot, not at the roof but at the sky, a sound of pure, violent warning. The explosion of his rifle, a split second before Jensen's, made the mercenary flinch. Jensen's shot, meant for Claire's head, tore through the air. It hit the barrel of chemicals, exploding the bottles, sending a shower of silver nitrate and fixer into the air. The heavy metal tin-type plate was thrown from Claire's hand, skittering across the dirt. All hell broke loose. "He is on the roof!" Eli screamed. Pike's deputies, panicked, drew their guns. Rosa fired, not at a man, but at the sign above Pike's head, sending a shower of wooden splinters down. "Drop them!" she roared. Jensen, his cover blown, fired again, wildly, into the crowd. Kai was already moving, scaling the side of the land office, his knife in his teeth, a predator in his own element. The crowd dissolved into a screaming, shoving mass. McGraw saw his chance. This was the chaos he needed. He grabbed his ledgers from the table and made a break for his horse, tethered in the alley. Pike saw him go. "Cover him!" he yelled at his deputies, and he ran after his boss. They did not get 3 steps. The crowd did not just scatter. They reformed. The vaqueros, the miners, the ranchers. They surged forward. They were not a mob. They were a wall. They blocked the alley. "Going somewhere, Mr. McGraw," the lead miner said, his pick handle held like a club. "Arrest this man!" McGraw shrieked at Pike. Pike raised his rifle, but he was facing a dozen armed, angry ranchers. His deputies, seeing the tide turn, were slowly, very slowly, raising their hands. "I think," Rosa said, stepping up to Pike, her own gun level. "You are done, Sheriff." She plucked the star from his chest and his rifle from his hands. At the same time, Eli Bennett, the postal rider, the boy, stepped onto the table. "Wait," he yelled, his voice cracking but loud. "Wait, there is more." He was holding a letter. This is from Mr. Fairchild, McGraw's accountant. He gave it to me last night, after they burned the shed. He was terrified. He said he could not be part of it anymore." All eyes turned to Eli. "It is a confession," Eli read, his voice gaining strength. "It says, I can no longer abide by these actions. The land deeds were forged. The signatures on the water treaty were fraudulent. The attack on the stagecoach was arranged by Mr. Jensen, on the orders of Mr. McGraw, to provide a pretext. The payroll was never in the crates. It was a shipment of Navajo artifacts, stolen to be sold to a collector in San Francisco." It was over. The lie was dead. Claire, on her hands and knees in the dirt, was ignoring the chaos. She had found her tintype. She picked it up. The fixer had done its job. Just barely. She stood up. She walked through the silent crowd, past the disarmed Pike, past the miners who held McGraw. She held the small, metal plate up for the railroad man to see. The image was faint, streaked with chemicals, but it was there, a map, her map. The lines were clear, the line from Tubillarmawee, not to the town, but to the silver mine. "My truth," she said, her voice a ragged whisper, but it cut like a knife. McGraw looked at the tintype. He looked at the miners. He looked at the Navajo warriors. He looked at Kai, who had just dropped from the roof, his knife clean. He had not had to use it. Jensen was gone. "This is not legal," McGraw whispered, his voice hoarse. "It is now," the mayor said, his voice shaking, but finding a new spine. He turned to the ranchers. "Take him, and him." He pointed at Pike. "Lock him in the jail. Wait for the U.S. Marshals. We will let them read the paper." The square did not explode in cheers. It fell into a deep, stunned, and heavy silence. The high, thin whine of the wind was the only sound. Silas McGraw, his face the color of old ash, was just a man in a suit. Sheriff Amos Pike was just a man with a tin star that suddenly looked like a child's toy. It was Rosa Delgado who moved first. She walked over to the two stunned, disarmed deputies and took their rifles. She did not point her own gun. She did not have to. "Well," she said, her voice dry, "it seems we have a vacancy for a sheriff." The crowd, which had been a mob, then an army, now became what it had always been, just people. They looked at each other, exhausted, dusty, and unsure what came next. He tried to kill us," the miner, Jeb, said, his voice thick. He was looking at McGraw, his hands clenching on his pick handle. "He tried to steal our water." A low murmur started. The word rope was whispered. "No." Claire's voice was ragged, but it cut through. She was still standing with the tintype in her bandaged hands. "No, we did not do this to become him. We did not fight for the truth just to end it with a lie." "She is right," Hasty and Yazzie said, his voice quiet. Kai translated, his own gaze sweeping the crowd, daring them to disagree. "You cannot wash blood with more blood. It only makes the stain wider." "What do we do with them?" the mayor asked. Wringing his hands, he was looking at Claire, as if she were the new law. "We wait." Claire said, "Eli, your confession, that letter is evidence for a United States Marshal, not for us." As if the words had summoned them, two riders appeared on the horizon, coming fast. They were not ranchers. They wore clean dusters, and they rode with the tireless, mechanical efficiency of federal law. The Pinkertons, in their arrogance, had sent a telegraph about the uprising. They had, in their final act, called the very men who would bring them down. The arrest was a quiet, legal, and deeply anticlimactic affair. There was no shootout. There was no grand speech. The marshals listened. They looked at Eli's letter. They looked at Claire's tintype, and they looked at the faces of the entire town, united. Silas McGraw, his railroad, his petition, and his silver mine were done. He and Pike were cuffed and put on a wagon to be taken to the territorial capital for trial. They were not lynched behind a barn. They were simply removed. Justice, this time, would be done by the book. It was slower than revenge, but it was permanent. The next day, the real work began. The half-built, ugly scar of McGraw's dynamite and scaffolding still sat at the narrows of Tubilni. It was not a committee that went up there. It was the whole town, the miners, who knew explosives, carefully removed the last of the unexploded dynamite. The ranchers, who had strong teams, hitched their horses to the raw, new-cut timbers and pulled them down. The vaqueros and the Navajo warriors worked side by side, rolling the blasted rocks away from the mouth of the spring, clearing the wound. Claire was there, her hands still wrapped, directing, not as a boss, but as a witness. She was using her camera again, the big one, which Eli had miraculously repaired with glue and wire. She was documenting the rebuilding. By the second day, the spring was free. The water, clear and cold, ran as it always had. That evening, they met again in the saloon, but it was not a saloon. The bottles had been put away. It was a town hall. "Pike is gone," the mayor said, his voice humble. We need a new law, but first, we need new rules. For the water." Hastian Yazzie was invited to sit at the main table. He did not come alone. Kai sat with him. "The water is for all," Hastian said, and Kai translated, "but all must guard it." A new plan was drawn up. Not a petition, not a contract, a covenant, an agreement. The town of Dusty Bend, the ranches, and the den would share the water. A new body was formed to enforce it. The Tubilni Water Committee. It would have 4 members, and all decisions had to be unanimous. The mayor nominated the first John Abernathy, the rancher who had been the first to stand with Claire. The miners nominated the second Jeb, who had spoken up. The Navajo, through Kai, named their third Hastian Yazzie, and the fourth, Abernathy said, looking across the room. "I think it has to be the one who saw the truth in the first place. I nominate Miss Claire Bennett." Claire was stunned. I am just a photographer. I run a shop." "No, ma'am," Jeb the miner said, his voice rough. "You are the one who did not back down. You are the one who got burned. We trust you." She looked at Kai. He was not smiling, but his eyes were proud. She accepted. The balance was set. The old power of the ranchers, the new power of the miners, the ancient wisdom of the Navajo, and the clear, uncompromising eye of the witness. Life began to settle, but it was not the old life. It was something new. Rosa Delgado, who had been paid a substantial, anonymous reward from the railroad's seized assets, did not buy a new dress. She bought the old livery stable. "I'm opening a business," she announced to Claire a week later, her hands on her hips. "The Delgado School of Equitation. For ladies, I am tired of watching women sit in wagons. And," she added, a wicked glint in her eye, "I am tired of watching men ride badly. A woman who can control a 1,000-pound animal can control her own life." Eli Bennett recovered. The bruises on his face faded, but the change in him remained. He still carried the mail, but he was no longer a boy. He was the official liaison, the messenger, the connective tissue between the town, the ranches, and Hastian's people. He was the one who carried the notices for the water committee, and he did it with a straight back, a serious face, and a quiet, earned pride. Claire returned to her shop. The ruin of the search, the fire, it was a long, slow process. But as she cleaned, she changed. She was no longer just a shopkeeper. She set up a special corner. She hung the plates. The first beautiful, failed landscape of the canyon, the plate of the stagecoach, with the McGraw logo, the tintype of the boot print, the tintype of the map. She labeled them, not with prices but with dates and facts. She called it the Dusty Bend Archive. She was not just documenting the light on the rocks. She was documenting the truth for any child, any grandchild, who wanted to know what happened here. She was not doing it to accuse, she was doing it, as she told Eli. So we remember the cost of water. A few weeks after the hearing, the Navajo held a ceremony at the spring. It was not for the town. It was for them. A ceremony of gratitude, of cleansing, of restoring the balance. Kai was there. He was not the scout. He was not the warrior. He was a man of his people. His face painted in a way she did not understand. His voice part of the low, powerful chant that echoed from the rocks. He was singing. The songs were not broken. Claire came, but she stood far back on a high ridge. She had her camera, but it stayed in its case. She watched, and she respected the boundary. This was his, this was theirs. She did not take a photograph. She took out a small, leather-bound notebook and a pencil. And as she watched the smoke of the sacred fire rise, she began to write down what she saw. She wrote about the sound of the chant, the smell of the juniper, the way the setting sun hit the red cliffs. She was learning to see in a new way. Her internal war was over. She had been so afraid of love, so afraid of being owned, of dissolving, like her father. But watching Kai, she understood. He was not a man who would ever own her. He was a man who would stand beside her. Loving him did not mean losing herself. It meant having an ally. It was not weakness. It was the greatest strength. Kai, too, had changed. He had spent his life trying to protect his world, to be a shield. But Claire did not need a shield. She was a shield. He learned that love was not just about protection. It was about partnership. It was about trust. It was about holding the chemicals steady while she trapped the light. That evening, they met at the edge of town, where the last adobe houses gave way to the open desert. It was the line between their two worlds. They had been working all afternoon, not talking, just working. They were building a new, wide stone water trough. It was not for the town. It was not for the Navajo. It was for everyone, for the rancher's cattle, for the Navajo's sheep, for the miner's mules, for any rider, from any world, who was thirsty. The stones were heavy, but they worked together. Claire, her hands still tender but healing, mixed the mortar. Kai, his muscles straining, set the heavy foundation stones. As the sun set, they placed the last stone. The trough was finished. Simple, strong, permanent. Kai turned, his hand brushing hers. It was not a caress. It was an accident that was not an accident. She looked at their hands, side by side on the cool stone. Her pale and scarred from the fire, his dark and scarred from the earth. "It is done," she said, her voice quiet. "It is begun," he replied. He did not kiss her. He just stood with her, shoulder to shoulder, as they watched the last light leave the sky. The trough a dark, waiting symbol of a new, shared trust. A year passed. The high Arizona sun beat down, but it was not the same sun. The railroad had bypassed Dusty Bend, choosing a route with easier grades and less complicated. Local affairs, the silver mine, without McGraw's stolen water, had gone bust. And Dusty Bend, left to its own devices, had not died. It had changed. The covenant held. The great spring at Tbilini flowed freely, its water shared by a complex, delicate, and fiercely protected schedule. The ranchers got their water for their herds. The Navajo flocks had their grazing. The town had its share. The first summer had been hard, the rationing strict, but no one had gone thirsty. The water committee, with its 4 heads, argued, debated, and compromised. It was slow, And it was messy. And it was real. The alliance, born of fire and desperation, had cooled into a new, tough, durable kind of peace. Claire Bennett's shop was no longer just a mercantile. It was the heart of the town. The Dusty Bend archive had grown. People, miners and ranchers, even Navajo women, began to come to her, not for portraits, but to have their own stories recorded. She took a photograph of a miner's hands, scarred from the rock. She took a photograph of a Navajo woman's weaving, the pattern a story in itself. She had bound them all into a book. It was not a grand, Eastern-style publication. It was printed by a small press in Prescott, bound in simple, rough canvas. She called it Waters of Dusty Bend. It was a quiet book. It held the image of the spring, the photo of the forged contract, the tintype of the boot print, and it held faces. The face of Jeb, the miner, the face of Abernathy, the rancher, the weathered, magnificent face of Hastian Yazzie, and, on the last page, a photograph Kai had taken of her. She was not smiling. She was looking at the camera, her hands, scarred but healed, holding one of her glass plates, her eyes clear and unblinking. The profits from the book, which were small but steady, did not go into her pocket. They funded the new town library, which was, for now, a single, tall shelf in her shop. It was not just for books. It was a literacy program. Eli, his mail routes done, would teach anyone who wanted to learn, white or Navajo, to read the words. Kai had become a different kind of man. The warrior was still there, but the scout had found a new purpose. He was the intermediary. He was the one who could walk in both worlds, and so he became the guide. He led geological surveyors, not to silver, but to new sources of clean water. He guided settlers, not to new claims, but to lands that would not put them in conflict with his people. His greatest role, however, was as a teacher. He had taken Eli's literacy program and added his own. He taught the children, the tow-headed sons of the miners and the dark-eyed children from his own community. Together, he taught them to read the earth. "This," he would say, pointing to a page in a book, "is a story of what a man thought, and this," he would say, pointing to a faint track in the dust, a broken twig, a dislodged pebble, "is the story of what a man did. You must learn to read both." He was blending the two worlds, teaching a new generation to read not just the paper, but the truth. One afternoon, in the late fall, Claire was sitting on the porch of her shop. The air was cool, and the wind, coming down from the high pines, smelled sharp and clean. She was mending her camera strap. The old leather was cracked. She went inside, to the small chest where she kept her mother's things. She pulled out the ragged, torn piece of her old dress, the strip of calico she had tied to her camera in the stone hut. It was faded, stained with chemicals and dirt. She looked at it for a long time. It was a reminder of the fire, the fear. It was the symbol of the night she thought she would break. Her hands, the skin still showing a faint, silvery network of scars from the burns, were steady. She took a needle and strong thread. She did not throw the scrap of cloth away. She carefully, meticulously, stitched it onto the new leather strap. She was not hiding it. She was making it a permanent part of her, a reminder that to be free, she had had to tear down her own prison, that to find her strength, she had had to be willing to burn. Hastian Yazzie, who was older now, but whose eyes were still clear as the desert sky, came by. He no longer sat on the committee. His health was failing, but he came to sit on her porch and watch the town. He saw the new stone trough, the one she and Kai had built. A rancher's wagon was there, the horses drinking deep, and beside them, a young Navajo boy, letting his own ponies drink. They were sharing. The old man smiled, a deep, slow smile that creased his face. He pointed to the trough. He pointed to the spring, far off in the hills. "Water," he said, his voice a dry whisper. Kai was not there to translate, but Claire understood. Water flows because the banks hold it. People endure because they share. He reached out and, with one gnarled finger, he touched the strip of blue cloth on her camera strap. He nodded. Once, a gesture of profound understanding. A sound of drumming hoofs and high, clear laughter made them turn. Rosa Delgado, astride a magnificent black mare, was leading her riders. 6 of them, women from the town, from the ranches, riding astride, not side saddle, their faces bright with the sun and the sheer joy of their own power. They thundered through the main street, a beautiful, rattling, magnificent cavalry of the New West. Rosa raised her hat to Claire, a flash of white teeth, and was gone. Across the street, a new, bright, brass bell rang out. Eli stood in the doorway of the new, official United States Post Office. He had built it himself. It was small, but it was solid. And the bell was a sound of connection, of a future that was arriving, not by force, but by mail. The sun was low. The sky was turning that impossible shade of violet and orange. Kai came, as he always did. He did not come to her shop. He met her at the edge of town, by the trough. He had been riding, and his face was streaked with the dust of the high country. They did not speak for a long time. They were comfortable in the silence. It was a language they had built together. They stood, side by side, looking out at the horizon. The future was not a promise. It was not a guarantee. Jensen, the mercenary, was still out there. The railroad, though beaten, was still a snake in the grass. There would be more droughts. There would be more fights. The world did not promise endless peace. But they were not afraid. They had a structure, built of compromise and respect. They had a covenant. They had, for the first time, a shared home. Kai's hand found hers. He did not grip it. He just held it. His hand, scarred by the earth. Her hand, scarred by the fire. "It is a good light," Claire whispered, watching the sun die. "It will be back," Kai said. In the West, fire was easy. It was fast. It took whatever it wanted. But when you found the courage to stand in it, when you burned away the fear, the lies, and the old, paper-thin skins, what was left was light. Thank you so much for listening to the story. I would love to know where you are listening from, so please drop a comment below and let us connect and share our thoughts. If you enjoyed this, please consider subscribing to my channel, Wild West Tales, and giving this video a like. And if you really loved it, please support us by hitting that hype button, so this story can be heard by even more people.